This is Melanie Ochoa. I'm from ACLU of Southern California.
Brendan Woods, Public Defender, Alameda County.
LaWanda Hawkins, Justice for Murdered Children, LA County.
Edgar Hampton, Porac.
Thank you. I think that's everyone that's currently on. If the DOJ wants to dive in to their update.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Ochoa. So for this particular board meeting, we've really set it aside for the subcommittee to take votes on 3 different items. I think some of you may remember after our last board meeting, we were unable to move forward on these items because we did not have a quorum. So there are 3 different items, 4 different items actually, the subcommittee will be considering today. We do have 5 minutes set aside for each of those item numbers for further board discussion. After that, we will have public comment so the public can weigh in on these recommendations. And then we'll conclude the meeting by the subcommittee voting on those particular items. DOJ will be here to help answer any questions regarding the items the subcommittee is voting on. But this does include writing a comment letter regarding the regulations in AB 846. The item numbers also include a recommendation regarding the composition of the post commission. Some folks who were able to attend last time might remember that post has a lack of public members on the commission, and there was some board desire to make sure that the post commission was representative of the diverse views of our community and included more public members. And then the last 2 items are regarding board feedback regarding LD3, which is that Academy course board members reviewed regarding principled policing in the community. And then finally, we have an item that we left open for the board members if they would like to bring any other motions to the full board. Keeping in mind, of course, the full board has to approve these, so any of these motions are going to then be taken from the subcommittee to the full board for a vote. Does anyone have questions procedurally, how this is going to kind of flow today, or generally about any of these item numbers as we wait for quorum?
All right, thank you, Kendall. I think of those kind of main items that were on, substantive items, one is just an update, so I can go ahead and give that, and we can have any comments if folks want to chime in. And that's, so we're taking them out of order, but this is item 6, the recommendations about post-commission feedback on LD3, principal policing in the community. And so if you recall, we gave some pretty detailed comments on LD3 a few meetings back. We decided, I think, on the last meeting that we're just going to make sure that those comments are transmitted to post via sharing the minutes of that discussion, and then incorporate those comments into the next post, and the next RIPA report, and that we just wanted to continue to look forward to hearing back from Post in terms of how they incorporated our comments, and if they didn't incorporate comments, why they did not, and also just more engagement on kind of what actions the commission will take in response to the report and any other recommendations directed to Post in the report, and just to think about further ways to engage with RIPA on some of the items that truly implicate our mandate here to address issues of disparities in policing. Is there anything else folks wanted to mention on LD3? And I think we still are one short of a quorum, but maybe We can also just go to item 7, which was subcommittee recommendations on other items in the draft. I know we walked through some recommendations in the post section of the draft. That was cut short. I don't know if folks had any more outstanding comments. I had some minor things, but I forwarded those to post, which I'm sorry, I forwarded them to the DOJ. It's not to take up more time discussing them. But if other folks had things they wanted to either get on the record or share with the rest of the subcommittee and DOJ with respect to the substance of the post section of the report.
Melanie, we've been advised that Amar is on.
Yes, hello. Sorry, I had some technical issues.
Great, no problem. Do you want to just introduce yourself really quickly?
Yeah, my name is Amar Campanajara. I'm a local San Diego leader, and I ran for Congress a couple times, and I'm seen as a community leader when it comes to race and identity profiling. I had a high-profile incident where my congressman was calling me a terrorist for 4 years. And being Latino Arab American, I felt like it was important to have a voice from those communities at this board. So I'm happy to be here, and thank you.
Great, thank you. I'm not sure if you heard the item that we're discussing right now is just any additional comments to the draft of the post section of the RIPA report before we move into voting on any of the substantive items.
Yes, I read it. I'm good to go.
Great, thank you. First I suppose we can move to approve the minutes of our last meeting. I'll move to approve those if there's a second.
Second.
And we can do a vote, all in favor. You can go
Aye.
across.
Aye.
Any nays? I think I heard all ayes. Any nays?
Melanie, was that Brendan who did the second? Just to clarify
Yes.
for the minute. Okay,
Brendan second.
thank you.
Great. Okay. So we're being super efficient. So let's move on to this. I think the next is the recommendation regarding the post composition. We discussed in our last meeting, but we weren't able to vote on suggesting to the full board that we include in the report the recommendation that the legislature increase the public members of the post commission, potentially up to 12 at least, and to also require that those members have specific relevant backgrounds. Right now, there's no limitation on how the public members, who are essentially defined as folks without law enforcement background, should be, what kind of background they should have. And so I think the recommendation would be to both increase the number and make sure that they reflect both relevant experience, and including lived experience around policing. So that's the motion. I don't know if I need to say it any more clearly, or if you captured it.
Would it help if I shared my screen with the phrasing, or, I mean, the way you said it?
Sure,
I think
yes, that'll be helpful. Thank you, Kendall. So the recommendation was to increase to 12, at least 12, and include, yes, specifically require members to have relevant and diverse expertise. And I think we can look to various statutes, or the legislature could look to various statutes as to how that diversity and relevant expertise is established. There's the Cal Gang Technical Advisory Committee, there's the RIPA board, there's potentially the commission that was created under SB 2, presuming that is signed into law, as examples of how the legislature could think to make sure that that diversity is represented.
What was the total number? If you're talking about a 12, I didn't see it.
The total current number is 18.
So are we talking 12 on top of the 18?
No, so the current public members are 4, so we would increase that to at least 12. And I think part of the thinking behind that also was, in addition to having folks with specific expertise, the DOJ also looked at other similar licensing and professional boards and found that Post was an outlier in terms of the limited number of public members on those boards. And so this would both be consistent with the general kind of scheme in terms of those kinds of licensing boards, also, though, consistent with the inclusion of these very necessary and relevant perspectives into policing and the issues that Post is engaged in.
Do folks have any specific questions regarding licensing boards? Dr. Ochoa did mention that DOJ looked into that. We looked into 35 different licensing boards. What was very revealing is Post as an outlier when it comes to public membership. 22% of the Post Commission has public membership, but there are only 3 other licensing boards who have the same number. What's revealing, for example, is the medical board has double the number of public members in the Post Commission, and that's consistent across the board. But if folks have any more specific questions about that, I'd be more than happy to answer.
This is Brendan. I have no specific question. I think it's extremely helpful information you provided, and I agree with expanding to 12 public members.
So is that a second, Brendan, to the motion?
More discussion? Yes, that's a second.
Okay.
Just to be clear, we're going to need to discuss these. We have to have public comment and then the full
Sure.
vote. But we did skip item 4, but no rush on that.
So yes, I second.
Is there any, so I guess the procedure then would be just to do any other comments on this motion, and then if there aren't any other comments, just move to the other item and then circle back for a vote after public comment?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. We just want to have the public weigh in on that.
Okay. But I guess it has to be an actual pending motion, I guess, if it survives that someone seconds.
You
Okay,
could
so-
do public comment now, Melanie, if you wanted to, on this particular motion, and then vote on it, if that's helpful.
Let's do the other item that was skipped over as well, because I think there was a motion on that, and then the public can weigh in on both if they would like before we do that. And then open up for any other potential motions that folks want to bring. So, is there any other comment or question on this item? Okay. So then let's circle back to the recommendation on AB 846 regulations comment letter. So our last discussion, we basically we heard from Post and we heard from the DOJ on the regulations around AB 846, and we had the general recommendation that we want as kind of up here to recommend that investigators and evaluators assess candidates for peace officer employment specifically for explicit bias in their social media accounts, that investigators make findings with respect to each targeted construct identified in the bias assessment framework so that there's more of a record as to what was actually looked at and determined, and evaluators provide their specific findings with respect to each targeted construct, including which sources they looked at in assessing a person's attitudes, behaviors, traits, and attributes, whether there was direct evidence of biased behavior or attitudes, or if that evidence, if weak or ambiguous, what factors did the psychologist weigh in determining the person's biases? Those were kind of the recommendations that we generally discussed, and we were going to recommend that the DOJ work with the chairs, the co-chairs of this board to draft a letter reflecting those recommendations that could be entered into the public record, presuming that the full RIPA board agrees with the content of the letter. So we would, in the interim, craft a letter reflecting those recommendations, and then when this comes back, when we have our next full meeting, that they could weigh in on that specific letter and decide whether or not to submit it as part of public comments on this while the public comment period is pending. Just for those who weren't on the last meeting, we took kind of like a straw poll if folks were in favor, and folks were generally in favor that were present. I think everyone was in favor, but we didn't have a quorum to decide to actually take that step. So the motion would be as what's currently on the screen. Thank you for sharing. Whoever put that up there. I think Kendall. And yeah, if folks want to speak on this, either amend the recommendations or the proposal to have us submit a letter reflecting these.
Board Member Ochoa, this is Tanya Koshi. Before we get into discussion, I just want to note that it would be two motions. One would be a motion to prepare the comment letter, and a second one to authorize the co-chairs to work with our office on preparing the comment letter. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Any comments?
So who determines what's the evaluators are who determines, because I see here it says the evaluators will determine if the evidence. I'm trying to hold on. It's partial screen right now. Hold on. My question would be, who determines what is considered a bias? If I'm a member of the Catholic Church, and I'm using that as an example, is that considered? Does that fall within the line of some sort of bias because of my beliefs as a Catholic, or I don't understand who's going to determine what's considered a bias with regards to
Yeah. So Tanya can weigh in on this more if she'd like to, but I think this is not recommending any specific construct. The Post has already proposed a construct for evaluating bias. This is just to make sure that they have to document kind of how they made that evaluation. So this is essentially the part that we're adding is essentially to provide their specific findings with respect to those things, not creating those constructs in any way, if that makes sense. But Tanya can weigh in if that's not accurate or if she wants to add anything.
No, you captured it perfectly. Board Member Hampton, what Post has recommended or is proposing as their regulations is a chart where they identify 3 different constructs or areas that you can look into when you're evaluating someone for biases. And those are the person's attitudes, attitudes, behaviors, or traits and attributes. And you look at those 3 different areas when you're trying to evaluate them for bias. And what we discussed at the last meeting was there wasn't specific requirements that the evaluators make any specific findings as to each of these different constructs. And that same issue applies to the investigators as well when they're investigating the person's background. So to your question about, whether there's any guidance about whether someone's religious background would constitute bias, there isn't that sort of guidance. There is that discretion for the evaluators and the investigators to make their own determinations. It's just making sure that they put those determinations in writing, and that's to further transparency when evaluating and investigating peace officer candidates.
I see
Everybody.
that. Yeah, I was just going to ask you to
Hi, Bill. Yeah,
welcome, introduce yourself.
sorry, I'm late. Just can I ask a clarifying question? I'm trying to catch up. So this is suggested language for the evaluators that are doing background checks during academy or screenings for new academies, right? So it would be whoever does the background check. This is just instructing them explicitly that, you know, prior social media posts should be included.
Yes, that's right. It would be for any peace officer employment. So not just, I think, people going through the academy, but I think also lateral hires as well. And so it would be not just for the evaluators who are doing the, psychological evaluation of the person, but also for the investigators who are looking into the person's background.
So the text then to answer board member Hampton's query. So then it's law enforcement that are doing the screening and making the promotion decision are being instructed to look at and evaluate this additional material.
There's my understanding, and Tony, if you want to weigh in on this, is evaluators themselves wouldn't be law enforcement. They would be either psychologists or doctors who are qualified to do these kinds of evaluations. And the investigators, they don't necessarily need to be law enforcement. My understanding, at least practically speaking, is that they sometimes do have law enforcement backgrounds. Sometimes they're retired officers themselves who are working for the agency.
Thank you. Or maybe to further clarify the question, or to just dig a little deeper. So this is instruction to staff that currently does screening for promotion and whoever that may be, or who currently does screening for new hires and promotions or lateral moves.
Yes. And just to add, I think the comment letter would flesh that out. I think what we were trying to capture here on the screen is just kind of a very skeletal understanding of what the comment letter would include.
If there aren't any more comments or questions on this, I would just open it up for any other motions that the board or the subcommittee wanted to bring. And if there weren't any, then we could just open up for public comment and we can return to voting on these pending motions.
Do I need to make a second prior to that?
Sure.
I'm prepared to make a second on both motions. One to approve and one for us to draft a letter. I'm sorry.
Could I just interject a little parliamentary procedure here? Technically, you are all, when you make a motion and then second it and then abandon it, it's considered it is confusing. It may be confusing to the public, and so the better procedure is it's called laying it on the table, and then you have to revive it. And so I think it's better and it'll be more clear to the public if we make the motions all at the end, and instead of having several motions hanging out there and conducting other business in between. So please take public comment, but I would then ask that the three motions that you've all agreed upon, if you would restate them in order and then take the vote in that way so that the public is really clear about what is happening. Thanks.
That's fine. And then, so I guess we'll leave any other motions then until after public comment, if there are any. So I can open it for public comment now. I see, and I'll do it geographically as we usually do. Is there anyone in NorCal who'd like to make public comment? Any Central California folks? SoCal folks?
I have my hand raised here in Southern California.
Go ahead.
Thanks. Hi, this is Michelle Wittig in Santa Monica. I just wanted to say that I have been an instructor of master's level psychologists, some of whom have gone on to be employed in law enforcement agencies in the Human Resources Department, and who are tasked with giving assessments to recruits as part of their job. So from that perspective, when I read pages 27 to 30 of the material for today's meeting, I would like to say I was very impressed with the coverage of the psychological research. And I want to make 2 or 3 points. The first one is that since this subcommittee is tasked with commenting on both recruitment and training, it might be a good point to make that the tools for recruitment and the tools for training are a little bit in conflict with each other when we look at AB 846. Partly because AB 846 seems to say that you can't get beyond the recruitment door if you show anything less than 100% unbiased behavior, as assessed by these very rough and vague tools that psychology people like I have to do these assessments. So that is a bit of a high bar for a recruit. Then, after the recruit gets through the academy and they have a course in LD3 on community policing, they are told that everybody has bias toward their own group, both explicit and implicit. And of course, we'd like to try to overcome that. So I think it's a bit of a conflict that needs to be resolved here. The pages 27 to 30 do a pretty good job of that. And what I got out of it is that we should not interpret 846 literally to say that people who can't show 100% lack of bias should not get through the recruitment door. One thing we want to make sure of is that things like the implicit association test are used as a self-assessment, not as a diagnostic tool, and certainly not as a selection device for deselecting potential officers. So the material that's quoted on pages 27 to 30 is good. The research by Plant and Devine and by Eberhardt, all very good. Let's take them all with a grain of salt and acknowledge in a humble way that we don't have all the answers and that there is really no substitute for an excellent in-person interview to assess things like internal motivation instead of external motivation. Because it is supported by the research, it doesn't mean that people should rely on these rough and ready tests. No, they're informative, but they should never be used as a deselection device. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Was there any other comment from SoCal? Anyone that we missed upstate?
I'm here.
Go ahead, Mr. Hilton.
I could not find the meeting materials, the 20-odd pages that were just referenced by Mrs. Whitted. Perhaps the shortcoming is in myself, and perhaps it just isn't there. What I've noticed is that there is, or seems to be, a preferential way of building out materials and building out data. And because of my skin color, I am excluded from that preferred group. I resent it. I resent it bitterly. Now, this subcommittee is about posts. I think that posts should be excluded from things in very much the same way that I seem to be excluded. They had no business being a part of this because they do not believe that there is such a thing as racial profiling. That is not off the top of my head. This is what their training materials say. They have repeatedly pointed to us, the people who have been stopped by cops, and they've said to us that the perception that you have is your reality because cops don't racially profile. I would like to see posts go away. I would also like to see the California Department of Justice go away too. Well, we can't have that because they've been tasked with this. Now, I speak specifically of what I saw last week. The CHP is under instruction to desist the practice of 30-day impounds. The California DOJ is the CHP's lawyer. They have decided not to follow what the court has instructed. CHP, therefore, is in contempt of court. And we have these people, the people who are the sponsors of this, saying nothing. They are required, if I understand what the duty of an attorney is, to instruct the CHP on how to behave. They need to stop 30-day impounds. But the CHP does, the CADOJ does otherwise. This is a waste of the time of all of you people and of mine. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Hilton. Anyone else that we, yes, I don't see any more hands. Okay, thank you very much. Before we go into the pending motions, I guess, is there any other additional motions that anyone on the subcommittee would like to make? Okay, hearing none. Let's go with the last motion first on the letter 846. Do I need to restate the motion? You said revive it. Do I just revive it procedurally?
Yes, Melody, if you don't mind just restating the motion.
Okay. So the motion would be, the first motion is for the subcommittee to prepare a comment letter for the board's approval during the October 20th board meeting on post proposed regulations implementing AB 846, recommending that post revise the regulations to require investigators and evaluators to assess candidates for peace officer employment specifically for explicit bias in their social media accounts. 2, for investigators to make findings with respect to each targeted construct identified in the bias assessment framework. And 3, for evaluators to provide their specific findings with respect to each targeted construct, including the sources they looked at in assessing a person's attitudes, behaviors, traits, and attributes, whether there was direct evidence of biased behavior, attitudes, or if that evidence of weak or ambiguous, what factors did the psychologist weigh in determining a person's bias? Those would be the recommendations in the letter. Do I need a second again?
Yes, you'll need a second again.
I second it. Board Member LaWanda Hawkins.
Thank you, Luanda. Let's take a vote. I don't know if I have to vote on my motion, but I'm in favor.
Woods.
Board Raphael in favor.
I can't see the people anymore.
It might be easiest to do a roll call vote, just to make sure we get everybody's vote for purposes of the minutes. So I know Melanie voted in favor. Lawanda, you are voting in favor? Okay.
Yes, LaWanda's in favor.
Steve Raphael? Yes, in favor. Brendan Woods?
Yes, in favor.
Edgar Hampton?
I vote nay.
And Amar Kampanajar.
I'm in favor.
Okay, so there's 5 yeas, 1 nay, so the motion carries.
Great. And so the second motion related to authorize the co-chairs to work with the DOJ on preparing this letter for presentation to the board. Can I amend that to say it'd be Brendan solely working on this for the DOJ?
You're gonna lose a vote.
All right, both co-chairs.
I second that too.
I'm in favor.
You want to do a roll call again?
Yes.
Yeah. Why don't we do a roll call? So Melanie Ochoa,
Aye.
Lawanda Hawkins,
Yes.
Brendan Woods,
Reluctantly, aye. Yes.
Steve Raphael,
Yes.
Edgar Hampton.
Nothing against Brendan, just to remain consistent with my initial vote, I'll vote nay. Not that I don't think you would do a fantastic job, sir. I just being consistent with my first vote.
And Amar Kampanajar.
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries with 5 yeas and 1 nay.
Great. Thank you all, particularly Brendan. So let's vote on the other motion, which was, I don't know, Kendall, if you can put the language up again.
Yeah, I'll put that up right now. Can everyone see the screen?
Yes. So the recommendation would be, again, to recommend to the full board to ultimately vote on, through its inclusion in the RIPA report, that the legislature increase the public members on the Post Commission to at least 12 public members who are not former law enforcement, and specifically require members have relevant and diverse expertise.
Second.
Motion.
Okay, I think we have a second from Brendan. Let's do ahead with the roll call if you want to.
Sure. Melanie Ochoa,
Yay.
Brendan Wood, Edgar Hampton.
I vote yay. And is there any way not to change the original motion? Is there any way to indicate that that would put it in line with the current standards for the other boards? I think that's important to make sure we explain that.
I think we can include that in the report, right? That doesn't necessarily have to be part of the motion. It's just.
Yes,
Yeah.
we can include that in the report. And this is, just to be clear on both of these are motions to bring this to the full board, who will then vote on these. So you can certainly include that in the context. But if you don't want to amend the actual motion, then we can vote specifically on the emotion. And okay, great. So Edgar, you are a yay, correct?
Yes. Yes,
Okay,
I am. Thank you.
thank you. Steve Raphael,
I'm a yay.
Lawanda Hawkins,
A yay.
and Amar Kampanajara.
Yay.
Great. Okay, the motion passes.
Great, thank you all. Is there, let me just check back the agenda. In terms of next steps, is there anything else? Just going to be a report back to the full board, but I don't know if there's anything else aside from that. And then I guess us continue to work on the letter that DOJ will, in connection with DOJ.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think we've covered all of the items. The co-chairs will be working with DOJ on that comment letter regarding AB 846. And we will also work on drafting a letter regarding the composition of the post commission as well.
Thank you, Kendall, and thank you to the board members for this hastily thrown together additional meeting to just handle this business. And thank you to the members of the public who found time to also come out and join us and participate as well. Thank you, and see you at the full board meeting.